Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 28th of November, comes to you from London. And I start just by looking at this chart. This actually was a chart that I posted in a poll 2 weeks ago today, where I asked whether German power would fall below 100 euros by the end of the year. It expires at the end of the year, and we were sitting at 120 euros, and 51% of people said no, it wouldn't, and 49% of people said yes, it would. We had a target to 95, so we were at 120 euros then, and if we look at the chart today, we are sitting at 104 euros. So quite a big difference there. And we can see the targets are in train. So I guess if I did that poll now and asked people, I suspect the answer would be much more heavily weighted towards people believing that it would fall below 100 euros with only 4 euros to go. And also the sentiment's quite interesting, because when there was half the market not thinking it would happen, that meant that there was more scope or more room for people to turn bearish, driving the price lower. So really quite critical there. But the targets say it all. And I've had a question this morning about the targets. What is this slope of 2? Remembering that there are 5 different ways in which you can look at the targets, but my favorite is just a simple price time factor. And what you can do, I use 2 because that seems to work well for most things. But you can see here that this target here, for example, happened much, much faster. That's often the case, that counter trend moves will occur more quickly. So I could curve fit the data. And the same with the downside. You could say, well, these targets are happening a little bit faster, and I can just go and just amend those to, let's say 1.5. I can go here to 1.5, and I can just literally curve fit the data. And you'll notice how the targets are now changing. So if you're trading something specifically, you might want to curve fit the data. Personally, I just like using 2, and are we running faster or slower towards 2? That's the question that I would ask myself. So if we look at gold, for example, we can see here, if we look at the medium-term chart of gold, that these targets, actually this target it was nearly met, and so 2 may just not be enough, and I could adjust that. But I like using 2 to see whether I'm running ahead or behind the price, and we can do this for any chart you want. So we can just look at something like Microsoft. Here's Microsoft on the 60-minute chart, and we see here how the targets, this time on this target, it ran faster. On this target, it ran about right. So it didn't for a while, and then it caught up, but in the end, that's exactly where it got to, and that is 2. Now you can curve fit the data. You can even adjust it to, say, fit it to what's worked historically. But for the moment, these are my train tracks on Microsoft, and that's, for me, that's enough. I'm just watching those train tracks, and that's really how you use the targets. So we can go all over the place here. So we can look at Bitcoin, and you can see here. So if I do a chart of Bitcoin let's say this is the daily chart of Bitcoin. I just press the T key. It puts all the trends and targets on. And we can see straight away that these targets were not met in the time scale that they were given. So maybe we just have to say it takes longer than 2 on this time frame. And I can just zoom out, and so I might say, well, actually this was saying the end of next year we'd be at 61,000. Now we know on Bitcoin things can happen very, very quickly, but if I want to adjust to those targets, I can just go and do that. So let's just see what it looks like if I say 4 to the upside. And so by adjusting those targets, you now see that we are on this trajectory, and maybe that's a better set of train tracks. So that means 0.5% every 4 days. It's a daily chart. If I looked at the weekly chart, it would be, I can go and look at the weekly chart, and I could do the same sort of adjustments. But for the moment, that's the train tracks. So it's saying that Bitcoin is going up 0.5% every 4 days on average on its way to the targets. So that's how you use it. Don't forget that I'm happy to answer any comments and look at any stocks you want. So let's go back and look at charts today. So I'm going to start with sterling. I'm just going to choose some things that have been on the move. Sterling actually sitting at 126.50 against the dollar. On the again, this target here, we fell away from that. We're coming back through the cloud. The shorter term targets clearly not met in time. So 2 to 0.1% on the 60-minute every 2 hours is clearly not enough. And you'll find that on the shorter term charts, you often have to adjust that because it just takes longer to occur in hours or minutes. So that's an interesting one on the 60-minute chart on sterling. Here we're looking at the NASDAQ. Following the 2 to 1 on that upside target pretty clearly. We've got a little mini downside target here, not activated. That's why it's in orange. If we move below the low point where the thrust was given, it would be activated. Remember, these targets were devised decades ago. We've just adapted them to line charts. So the validity of these targets, if you've ever used point and figure, we've just adapted them to line charts. And we see here for the NASDAQ, they've worked pretty well. There's a downside target. All right, you might argue it happened faster, but I don't mind using 2 to 1 because ultimately I can see that it's falling faster than 2 or not as fast, and that's enough for me. But if you wanted to curve fit the data, you can, and you take that into account when you're looking at the target. So we see here the moves generally, it's been fine there on the upside. It actually happened a bit faster here, and at the moment it's following the trajectory, but we're waiting to see if we cross that. And of course a cloud cross would also turn us a bit bearish on the short term. On the daily chart, we see back here that these were the targets given and met. Interestingly, we will get a new thrust target on this when we get a reversal, but for the moment, we don't really have any clear targets. If I went to the long-term weekly chart, though, you can see here that we've got a very big target for the NASDAQ, pointing to the end of 2025. So that is a really big long-term target, and this is on the weekly chart. So here we're saying 1% every 2 weeks. On the NASDAQ, and that's the move towards the target. But you can see that we're diverging from that trajectory, and so this may well take longer to happen. So that's really how you utilize the targets there. Taking a look at, if we take a look at some of the other markets here, let's look at gold. Gold's looking very interesting lately. Again, we've activated a new upside target on gold. These targets were clearly not met. That one was nearly met some 2 months after, which should have been met based on that 2 to 1. So you could adjust it to 3 and say, is that how long it's going to take? This one clearly not met. It's a valid target, but just didn't happen in time. And now we've got a new target to 2,393. Call it 2,400 on the long-term weekly chart. On the medium-term daily chart. And if I look at the long-term weekly chart, we see here on gold, we're waiting for a new high here to activate that. That would be 2072 that would activate that. But we have got this target at the moment. So really, really very interesting looking at those targets there. Taking a look now at, let's have a look at something else. Apple. Apple's been really interesting. We had 2 downside targets. One of them has been negated. And by the way, I can put negated targets on and see where they were. And if I show the negated targets, we see here how that target's disappeared. So really quite interesting there as well. I generally don't look at the negated. I do look at the unactivated targets, but all these settings are here. If you want to know how to use these, I'll put a link in the comments below where there's a longer video. I'm limited to 10 minutes here on LinkedIn and YouTube, but the longer videos, I'll send the link so you can see how they all work. But another one that's very interesting at the moment is Amazon. We did post on LinkedIn yesterday. Upside targets here, looking like Black Friday is looking pretty good for Amazon. We did a Amazon versus Walmart yesterday, and Amazon having activated this new upside target. Again, I can go to the previous downside targets were given and met. Upside targets given and met. They're not bold anymore because they've been achieved. The bold ones are the ones that are in train that are not yet achieved. So that's also quite interesting. And if we look at the short-term chart, that's confirming. That's exactly the sort of thing we want to do. It's not happening very quickly, and we can see here that we might want to adjust those targets to curve fit the data. So if I just went and said, what happens if I go 1 and 1? That means now that it's going to move 0.5%, 0.1% on the 60-minute every hour. for Amazon. So 0.1% every hour. Those are the targets now. So that's that adjustment there. Feel free to play around with those. And as I said, I'll put the link in the comments below. Welcome any comments, any likes or any shares. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.